Welcome to a new Energy Capital interview. I'm Norma Martinez, and today we will be talking with Carolina Torres, Executive Director of Energy Industry and Transformation. Hello, Carolina, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
Thank you for giving us this interview. Today, Carolina will talk with us about the role of human in the industry. So I will start with the first question. Carolina, can you give me a brief description of your academic and professional career, please?
Yes, I've been with Cognite for a year, and prior to that, I worked for 30 years in the upstream oil and gas industry, predominantly with BP. I worked in my last 10 years or so in technology and digital innovation, and my last role was head of digital transformation for subsurface and wells. And I also participated in the Reimagining Energy and Reimagine BP transformation that BP recently announced in 2020.
Oh, great. That sounds incredible. What is your perception regarding the empowerment that a woman should have within the professional environment?
Okay. Yes, I do. I think that women bring a diverse way of thinking into the business environment. Men tend to be very linear. Of course, these are all just tendencies, but men tend to be very linear. They're a little bit more competitive. Women tend to be more collaborative. They are integrated thinkers. They tend to see things in kind of a matrix way. And I think that they also maybe sometimes can see things in terms of a big picture. In a way that sometimes men can't. So I think having a mixture of men and women is actually really beneficial in a business context.
Yes. What is the relevance of a woman leadership?
I'm gonna answer this question in the context of sustainability, okay? I really recently hosted a lunch in Houston, and it was a whole bunch of high-level women. It was kind of a women in energy lunch that I hosted. High-level women from all different companies like Exxon and Hess and BP, a bunch of different people. And we were talking about sustainability and how the mindset in the world was going to have to change in order to make a transition to new energy. So the old energy world is very linear. It's a supply chain. There are, extractors and transporters and suppliers and customers and disposers. It's very linear. In the new world, things are going to be a lot more cyclical. So supply chains are going to need to become cycles. And also, it's very complex, the new energy world. There's going to be a mixture of different energy types. There's not going to be a single source of energy that does everything. All of that's going to require a massive change in the way we operate. We're going to have to collaborate a lot more across the supply chains, from supplier to operator to consumer. We have consumers that are actually customers. So thinking in a very integrated fashion and in a very collaborative fashion is actually going to become the norm. And I think that women can bring that to the table.
What is the difference between choosing a woman for a position because she is a woman and choosing her for her capabilities?
I was in an hiring panel one time, and the hiring manager provided a list of candidates for a vice presidential position, and there were 7 males on the list. And he apologized to me and said, "Gosh, I'm really sorry, but I was the only woman on the panel, by the way." He apologized to me and said, I just couldn't find any adequate candidates. And I just remember looking at him and saying, you mean to tell me in a company of 20,000 people, 1,500 leaders, you were not able to find a single woman that was capable of fulfilling this role? And I think that this question around should people be, this question of meritocracy is a bit of a red herring. I think when guys say, there's just not that many engineers that are women, there are a lot of engineers that are women. There's something else that's happening in there, and it's around biases that people have, natural human biases to want to promote and hire people that are like you. You can relate to them easier. They're more like you. We need to train people to recognize their own biases and realize that that's what's happening. And B, we need to put systems in place that basically stop that from happening. I don't know if it's, on the hiring side, you basically remove any gender, you can use machine language actually, and analytics to remove gender from resumes, for example, and things like that.
What is needed in society and in the education for an egalitarian system of participation and leadership?
I have a really funny story from really early in my career. I was maybe like a month out of college, and I was riding the elevator home with a friend, and we were leaving at the end of the day, and we were in this elevator, and there was a bunch of suits in the elevator. There was like 5 guys in there with suits, very official looking guys. And one of them, we're riding the elevator down the building, and one of them says, another day, another dollar. And without even thinking about it, I said, another day, another 79 cents. And I thought it was really funny. I kind of laughed and chuckled, but it was dead quiet in that elevator. Like nobody said a word for like 10 floors. And then everybody got out like in utter silence. And my friend turns to me and right after that and says, do you know who that was? That was the CEO. It was mortifying. Open mouth, insert foot. But I'm telling this story because I do think that there are a lot of systemic things around equal pay. There's a lot, your question, there's a lot of things that we could be doing that would basically create a more egalitarian system. We need to, the countries that have, equal pay and equal rights tend to have a much better track record than the ones that don't. There's a lot of systemic changes that are needed and education of both men and women, but you can't have only women fighting for this stuff. And the reality is that actually men have benefited a lot from women entering into the workspace and creating things like more flexible hours and childcare and all kinds of other things, parental leave. Those things benefit men too. It can't be tagged as women's issues.
In the work environment in which you work, is there male predominance? How do you feel about it?
So that was definitely true for most of my career. In fact, when I first started out in 1992, I was often the only woman in the room. I was definitely, my first 4 years, I worked as a offshore well site geologist, and I was not only the only woman offshore on a rig with 100 other people or 50 other people or whatever it was. I was often the only woman that those people had ever worked with. It was like the first time that they had ever had to work with a female. So yeah, I mean, that most of my career was that way. And it was challenging at times, but it was also an opportunity. I've had both detractors and people who thought that, I had a boss that thought that women should stay home and take care of their kids. And he was very against me because I had kids and I worked. And I've had a lot of bosses that were super supportive, that were like already woke, if you will, and some that were not woke, but were willing to be woke. So, it takes all kinds of people. I think my attitude has always been to assume positive intent. I think that when people are biased or prejudiced or, treat you as less than in some way, it's because it's a learned behavior and they just haven't thought about it. And I've found that to be true, that most of the time, if you can, show people something different and a different way to think about it, they're willing to do it.
Thank you. Regarding stereotypes and gender roles imposed on women, do you consider that in US we have made progress, or what we must change?
I think we have made progress, but I think there's still a big gap and a long way to go. I think there's still a lot of stereotypes. Definitely when I moved more into a leadership position, I very often found that when I made a statement or spoke, or said anything, I might be using an exact same tone of voice as a male colleague would, but it was perceived in a really different way. In other words, women that are confident and strong and act decisively are often perceived as, witches with a capital B. And that is that's a perception that is out there in the world. And it's a perception that's kind of fostered a lot by media and by a lot of other things. But again, you just have to be patient and educate people and show value. And, some of it is just about being mindful and a little careful about how you say stuff. It's frustrating that, the guy sitting next to you who's saying the same stuff doesn't have to think about it as hard as you do. But that's life. That's the reality.
Yes. What are your most enriching experiences throughout your professional career? I had a mentor when I was in working in the Gulf of Mexico. This was kind of later in my career, maybe my 20th year, who was really, really helpful to me in just working things through. They weren't necessarily a person who pushed me, but they were there as a sounding board. And that was super helpful. And I've had some really good mentors and I've had some not so great mentors, but that particular person really enriched my life. And actually they were the person who helped me think about moving out of a sort of a technical track that I was on around geoscience and field development into the digital sphere. And they just saw me in a way, they saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, which is that I really like to think about the future. I really like to imagine and can paint a very powerful picture of potential future that other people can get excited about. That was kind of like a skill or a strength or a talent that I had that I didn't recognize in myself. And they did. And they told me, you need to go and be in a more central, functional, influencing role in the company. You need to be helping us to see how we can envision ourselves as a digital company and how we can envision ourselves as an energy company, not just an oil and gas company. And that was a really, really pivotal moment in my career. Thank you. What advice would you give to women who are trying to build a career or growth in the professional world?
Okay, I would say be yourself. Mm-hmm. Focus on delivering value. Always focus on what you do, what projects you take, what you do, and how it delivers value to the company. And don't be afraid to toot your own horn, because your male colleagues are not afraid to toot their own horn. They do it all the time. So it may feel odd. You may feel like you're a faker or whatever. Doesn't matter. Just do it anyway. Talk about yourself, talk about what you did, talk about the impact that it had all the time. And be confident about your differences. They're actually really valuable, especially in the coming complex digital and multi-energy world.
Great. We are currently experiencing an energy turnaround. Can you explain the crucial role that the data will play in delivering in all these commitments?
The energy transition is not going to happen without a significant change in the way data is operated and shared globally. So old energy, as I mentioned, in the traditional sense, is very linear, very simple. It's the hydrocarbon controlled by a few countries and a few operators who then distribute it around the world to consumers. It's just controlled by a few people. New energy is not going to be like that at all. There's going to be, solar and wind are equitably distributed around the world. There's a combination of several sources that are going to need to be managed and optimized. Consumers are now also producers. Supply chains need to turn into supply cycles. So consumers, regulators, and markets require proof of sustainable practice. So transparency is going to become really important. All of this requires a level of collaboration and transparency across the players that has never been necessary before. And all of it requires data. So sustainability is a data problem. And success is going to come from everyone collaborating together and sharing data and communicating with each other in a really different way.
Thank you very much, Carolina. It was a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you for the audience. See you soon in another new Energy Capital interview.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Carolina. I hope to see you soon.
All right. Take care, Norma.